everybody. So I'm making this video. Y'all know I usually just do a couple of reality shows and political commentary for the most part. I don't do vlogs and stuff like that because I don't follow it. And school starts tomorrow, but I'm prepared. I still get nervous like I did when I was a kid because you're meeting new humans. Anyway, but this one just set heavy on my heart. Um, I happened to see I was scrolling past TikTok on the train, scroll on TikTok on the train, and people talking about Mel's live, which I normally, I think I follow her on TikTok, and I'll see her something, but I just keep scrolling or whatever. Mel Rogers, from Love and Marriage Huntsville, formerly of Love and Marriage Huntsville. And for some reason, I decided to go back and watch it because they were saying something about the side chick who was a bird brain anyway. But Mel came out of court last week, and Martell, who appealed his plea bargain to it, where he admitted he was guilty the first time, has been back in court. And all they did was take off the domestic violence part, and he still has a written apology he had to write. That's still like, whatever on his record. I don't think he's going to do in time. And he then proceeds, and Melody records this. He then proceeds to circle around the courthouse to follow her and talk shit. And she said, I didn't say anything. And I believe that because I'm that kind of person. I have seen people over the course of my life, even when I was a kid before I realized what was happening, the kind of person I am. I learned in the kind of environment I grew up in and the people I grew up around, sometimes just to not react. Not always because it was the best decision, but that became a coping mechanism for me in being teased or mistreated. Keep your head up. My mother always told me that. You always keep your head up. You never walk with your head down. And she was especially saying that. She said that in regards to anybody, but she was making a special point every time she taught me that, was because Black people used to have to walk with their heads down all the time to defer to white people. And she said, don't you ever let me see you do that. So I learned, despite how I may have been feeling. So people, people see things about you and they hate you for what they think you have. Now, there are things that I think people see in me that I quite frankly just don't see in myself. And I had a conversation like that with somebody today. And while I appreciated their words, I was just like, how do people, this is not the only person who's ever said this to me. But anyway, and it wasn't like disrespectful or anything, but I digress. And he proceeds to harass her, telling her to fix her hair and her wig. I'm talking to you and your boyfriend, who's actually her bodyguard. And then, the side chick was in there. Now, before I get into what hurt me, let me just go ahead and say this. I got this advice from my roommate's uncle when I was in college. She was from Detroit. And I remember he said to me one time, Martell played football. Okay. And football players are typically not bright. They're not. And when I was teaching at UCLA undergrads who were in football, and I would see them falling asleep in class in like the lecture halls, a lot of them were my like students that I had the TA for. And one boy in particular, a couple of them, like the strong quarterback, came for help a lot. And I said to him one time, I said, I don't want to mention his name because I still remember his name and his face and everything. I said, why are you always falling asleep in class? Y'all say y'all want to learn this stuff. You're in this American history. What can I, like, what do we need to do? And I said, but you need to come up with some strategies. He was like, well, we still have practice at 4:00 in the morning. And I remember saying to him, it's March. It's football season over. He was like, oh, we still have to practice. And the level of time, attention, and focus that is required for football, I realize the reason why many of them are not bright has nothing to do with an inherent not brightness, right? It's because the time, the attention, and not to mention what is inevitably going to be some level of brain damage and body damage limits your ability to be able to do other things, like learn during those years. So I don't say that like to be dismissive, but I am saying that's why. Martell, on the other hand, is somebody who I think is stupid regardless. And played football. Getting back to my roommate, I promise I'm going somewhere with this. Roommate's uncle. And he was saying, he played football or whatever. And I was like, oh, okay. I was like, my father played in high school, but he, whatever. And he said to me, well, let me just tell you something. Just so you know. Don't date a football player. Because I can't remember if we were talking about a Morehouse football player. We already know that it's not. But anyway, he just said never date a football player. And I said, okay. And I thought he just meant like he was talking about the famous ones. And I was like, why would I ever run into a football player? He was like, because most of them are abusive. And I promise I'm going somewhere with this. Stay with me. Most of them are abusive. And we've seen this play out in TV and news stories over the years. I'm not just talking about OJ and Hernandez. No. As far as domestic violence. We have seen this over and over again. And I think a lot of parents put young boys who have anger issues based on what's in their home, and no, I will not single out single mothers. I won't do it. Parents, okay, because domestic violence is also learned behavior. There are definitely men who abuse their wives in front of their children, along with their children. That makes anybody angry. But testosterone, particularly in those teenage years and stuff like that, is what also escalates violent reactions. Okay? And that's why it has to be honed early on, because it's inevitable that a boy will have testosterone. And I think a lot of people who see their kids with those issues, Aaron Hernandez, O.J. Simpson, what we're talking about anger issues, and so many other players. Lawrence Taylor, who was a known sexual assaulter, and somebody I know who went to school with his son was known for raping girls in college. And Trump just gave him a job, birds of a feather. Martell strikes me as that kind. And while his father wasn't in his life, kids are angry about that. And they have the right to it. But Martell's constant accusations that Mel, was seeing somebody else. Mind you, he had a whole side chick and other bitches who didn't compare to Mel and also those shit. And no telling what kind of men his mother engaged with. Now, I'm not here to talk about nobody's body mileage or anything like that, but I'm saying there's a good chance she was in those kind of situations, because in my mind and in my heart, men who accuse women constantly of cheating, my question to you is, and it's always a woman that's not cheating, by the way, always. My thing is, what the fuck was your mama doing that you believe this shit? Like, for real. And narcissism, and once again, I'm an armchair psychologist, psychotherapy every week. So I remember asking my psychoanalyst before, I may have told them before. And I remember, because I said, where do narcissists come from? Are they born? Like some people, scientists go back and forth, whether psychopaths are born or they develop into that. Psychosis is difficult to tell. But he was like, no, narcissists aren't born. He said, what happens is usually during those preteen, teenage years is where the narcissist becomes who they are, because something has happened. Several things have happened. And whatever it is inside of them, they make up their mind, it's never going to happen to me again. But it's not a healthy thing. It becomes, I'm going to make sure I do this to everybody else so it never happens to me. Because I know I feel like dog shit for the things that have happened to me. I know I've been abused. I'm never going to let it happen again, but I got to abuse other people. I got to make their life chaotic. I have to make their life destabilized. That makes me feel in control. And that's why narcissism is so dangerous. but people just throw it around. It doesn't simply mean self-absorbed and you're just staring at each other in the mirror, even though that comes, the name is rooted in that Greek myth, but that's not why it is. And when I was hearing Mel say, she started to record it because she said she knew she needed evidence. This is right after court. This doesn't surprise me as someone who has studied, stayed up, and had, quite frankly, people, family members who have experienced domestic violence, unfortunately. Those kind of men, I don't give a fuck what anybody says, are more dangerous than the average murderer, because we all know people who say, and I hate domestic violence. It's assault. I hate that term. What was I saying? We all know. Oh yeah, we all know men who are abusive do murder their partner. Okay. We all know that people can murder somebody. That murders typically only murders one person. They don't necessarily get out and murder somebody else. Statistically, that's not the case. People who rob, yeah, they may have a habit, but they rob. You know what I mean? Men who are violent like that with women are repeat offenders. The same way I think pedophiles are not simply are they repeat offenders, but they're very calculated and strategic. That's why that grooming thing is so important in that process, in that pattern. And the way in which they show up in schools, in churches, allow the level of protection. They try to earn the trust of a lot of the adults, particularly the powerful adults in those spaces. And those people do more harm, irreparable harm, than any murderer, anybody who got in a fight and stabbed somebody who decided they were gonna roll a blunt or snort cocaine on the train, as I have seen. I'm just saying, those people aren't nearly as dangerous. They're not as calculated. And that's why it bothers me. But I think what my heart's saying, when, Mel was still selling her products, right? And I was watching it because I know what it is to be high functioning, despite how terrible your circumstances are. I knew every time Mel said, I haven't said all I could say. I knew every time, I didn't know exactly when it happened, but I knew when she said things like, oh, he had done that to me several times. And finally, I just got tired of it and I took it to court. This man got out of court after admitting what he did and then keeps saying, oh, it's over now. It's over now. Now, granted, yeah, he's talking about the court case is over, but that, oh, it's over now, like, I'm coming after you. First of all, it is humiliating to have to deal with this over and over. You just got out of court, and your first order of business is to continue harassing the person you are still found guilty of harassing. That's what I'm saying. That's a different kind of psychosis. And Mel said she went into the magistrate and the white man said, that he said, well, I don't hear a threat. First of all, that is a threat. Harassment, whatever you want to call it, it's a threat. Now, there are two things happening. We know domestic violence laws are often very weak. You can get out in a day, 30 days, if you had several offenses. I know that those laws are purposeful, and I think the reason why those laws have not been changed is not because we don't have the evidence of murder, not that we don't have evidence from psychologists with years of studies and records as to the trauma it inflicts on children, whether or not they're being beat by that parent, because some domestic violence abusers only abuse their wife but not their kids, and then many abuse both. But whether it's happening or not, it's still considered traumatic, right? That this should be a more serious crime. Why? Because men pass these laws. Also because people who are passing these laws often who would be responsible for passing these laws engage in that behavior. Well, they're not going to criminalize themselves. And when she was talking about how Black women are not protected, I said, absolutely. And let me tell you something. I know there is a contingent of African American women, in particular. I'm talking about African American women right now, because we're talking about male, who have this very, very wrong assumption, idea based on limited understanding and knowledge that somehow, oh, this is a collective woman's issue and we should have more women in these positions. No, the fuck we should necessarily. Many a Black woman has had to learn that lesson the hard way. White women are not our allies. Now, domestic violence as an act against women, yes, that's collective. Race, class, location, globally. That's a thing that affects all women. The bottom line is, though, in a society that was built on inhumane practices like chattel enslavement, owning people as property, and treating them that in law and institutionalize the racism and the treatment for centuries, and then continue and remix it on and on and on. We don't have the same struggle. African American women, like Sojourner Truth, Ida B. Wells, who's one of the most radical women that ever existed, Mary Church Terrell, all of these people, particularly during the 20th century, had tried to develop relationships with other women, certainly around getting the right to vote, so having a voice in government, right? White women have historically bounced on and attached themselves to Black movements. You see it with the first wave toward the ballot, beginning mid-19th century to 1920. Did Black women get the right to vote? Absolutely not. The majority of Black women lived in the South and no Black people could vote. Second time around, when they finally do get it, it's the 1965 Voting Rights Act. Black women did not have protection of the vote. Ida B. Wells corresponded, then he wrote letters to people like Susan B. Anthony, and she checked her, because Susan B. Anthony, in all her womanist and abolitionist and rah, 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 made very public speeches where she said, after doing all this woman stuff and this, that, and the other, how did white men, are you seriously going to give these coons, these former slaves, these ill-educated Negroes, these men, the right to vote before us white women? And Ida B. Wells got in that ass. The National Association of Colored Women was created precisely because Black women were perpetually excluded from those movements. And we don't even need to go into the non-Black groups like the Asians, and like we already know they with them. But I'm saying white women had power. All of that fighting African Americans did with the Black freedom movement in the 60s and 70s, the overwhelming beneficiary of those things were white women. And if women need to be put in these positions automatically to help, and it's just going to be across the board, that's BS. If that's the case, then why didn't they start hiring us once they got those positions? Because like Bell Hooks said, white women simply fight for women's rights because they want the same power as white men. And the power of white men is bent on the capitalist exploitation of Black people's labor and the myth of racial superiority. But the very realness of it in law. And when Mel said, I didn't even tell y'all how he punched me that time, my heart sank. Because I had suspected that all along. And I don't think it was once, but that's her story to tell. With 4 children. And she had to deal with all that trauma. People like Kimmy gaslighting her and taking up for the man who's abusive. And whether they knew all the details or not, they had enough stuff to check him on. And you did this on TV over and over again to another Black woman? So I don't necessarily think Black women are automatically the solution, or women being in these positions are automatically the solution, because there's plenty of women who, because we live in a capitalist country where it says the way up is to one, do it this way, certain kinds of degrees, law degree, business degree, because what we value in this country, what makes you smart, what we associate with intellect is wealth. And if you're going to be one of those wealthy lawyers that becomes a judge, then you better stay in line. You better stay in line. You better talk like us, walk like us, judge like us. And if not, don't ever expect to be a federal judge, Supreme Court judge, or anything of the like. All right. And I'm not saying that about Ketanji, but we all know that's an exception in terms of her policies or behavior. See Clarence Thomas. What you need are people who understand domestic violence, recognize that it's wrong, and brave enough to act on it in a way where you keep those people off the street. And that can be a white man. That can be that Indian, I think he's Indian, Asian American judge who can't stand Diddy, but we can all tell. That can be a black woman with a conscience. That can be a white woman with a conscience. But let's not act like women just being women are going to support. I've known people who have been abused, and once they get out of the situation, even when they were in it, they made excuses for the person abusing them. And then they say things also once they get out of that situation. Well, she wasn't like me, and she, not to be popping off. And those same people, okay, educated, uneducated, there's a large degree that it does not matter. And like I'll tell you over and over again, Ida B. Wells was trying to march in that suffrage movement. She was members of Delta Sigma Theta. They insisted that Ida B. Wells go to the back of that march. If black people wanted to be a part of black women wanted to be a part of the national suffrage march in DC. And Ida B. Wells said, "The hell with all y'all. We're going to march." Now, were they ever able to do that with them white hoes again? No, but they didn't mind those black women's labor when they were writing letters and petitioning the presidents and so on and so forth to get the women's suffrage bill passed. And then all of a sudden, those black women's work. Woodrow Wilson. Ida B. Wells was fighting against the lynching of black men and the few black women that existed by herself, running the Chicago Defender, but had to come to that recognition. Oh, I knew they were racist, but I at least thought they would. They didn't do that. Mary Church Terrell. All these people were right all along. And as someone once said, black women have always been telling us, all we have to do is read it. Okay? Bell Hooks was right. Black feminism wouldn't be necessary. We could actually just say feminism. If that was the case, it's not. It's not. Okay? Patricia Hill Collins was right when she talks about the shortcomings of the civil rights movement, because the bottom line is, unless you dig to the bottom of the barrel, and black women are at the bottom of the barrel, if you don't seek to get the very bottom people, their issues are the first to be addressed, because that'll eventually lift everybody up. That's a shortcoming. And when black women got left off, that has a lot to do with the shortcomings. Now, Patricia Hill Collins writes this, you can go and look. And while Patricia Hill Collins was writing these things, and some other black women, Toni Cade Bambara, so on and so forth, you have people like, God rest her soul, Dorothy Height. And you can read it in the book Too Heavy a Load. Okay, it's a great book. Historical book about black women's labor. Well, not labor, but push for rights, and it came in all sorts of forms. And Dorothy Height actually endorsed the masculine era, because that was the first time in any significant black movement where black women were really not at the forefront, whether their labor was treated as such or not. They're really, and it just became these images of black men across the board. And Dorothy Height said, you know what, we do need to focus on black men. And this is the president of the National Association of Colored Women. The same organization that was built to focus on black women's issues in particular. Also, while she's saying, yeah, we need to take a back seat because it's important to have the family, that, and the other, Dorothy Height was very clear. She refused. She did not marry, didn't want to marry because she saw it as a trap, didn't want children. But yet and still, the public persona and the push of the politics of such a powerful organization, which I still have respect for, because my great mentor, who has now passed away in 2021, that's Jane E. Smith, who was president of the National Association of Colored Women. I'm just making a point. This is after her, of course, after Dorothy Height. Dorothy Height went along with it. Now, I know this probably seems like a roundabout way, but what I'm saying is domestic violence is treated as acceptable. We would assume, and there are many people who I think see themselves as enlightened and say, yeah, these are all women's issues. And that, we should give women benefit of the doubt with these things. White women can't get the same benefit of the doubt, as far as I'm concerned, by us. When they see Black people having domestic violence incidents, and this is recorded, okay? You can see stuff by Monique Morris, her sociology reports, when she's saying, no, they'll write that, well, that's just how they deal with one another. That's what they do. They argue, they fight. It's not even perceived the same way. They don't even keep up with the domestic violence statistics of guilty verdicts by people. It's scattered. It's got to be like these individual nonprofits. Why? Now, the majority, they do say that Black men at a higher rate do go to jail for it. Now, is that because they're trying to protect Black women? No. It's because prosecutors know it's an easy sell to send a Black man in jail. And he probably is guilty when it comes to domestic violence, but I'm just making a point. And that's what makes our dynamics very complicated. But this isn't, I'm not saying that Mel owes anything, but all I could think as people try to act like, oh, this is a women's issue, Mel was absolutely right talking about Black women. But the thing is, we don't need more Black women in those positions who simply behave like white men. I've just seen that too many times. Kimberly Crenshaw came up with that term intersectionality when in the 1980s, Black women sued a company for not hiring any Black women, having any of them on staff, educated, so on, met every single requirement. And they said, what are you talking about? We're not racist. We met our quotas. We have X amount of Black men, X amount of white women. We have women and men covered. And Black women became invisible. People think intersectionality means, oh, I'm gay, and I also, hang out in, these masculine straight space. No. I know I'm stretching it here, but white people have tried to co-opt that word. Intersectionality means intersectional oppressions, okay? Which means everybody can be a part, because everybody is not oppressed like us. And it was specifically for Black women to articulate those ideas. And it seeps into every aspect of our lives. Mel has 4 kids. Mel is clearly the breadwinner. If Martell was who he said he was and was talking loud and rah-rah, talking about how he pulled her out of the classroom as if his sorry ass, like as if he wasn't a teacher as well, she moved on to something else, but she didn't down the profession. So why you broke? Why are you moving from place to place? Why can't you ever finish anything? No, narcissists are very calculated in who they marry. On purpose. Because see, it was never really about love. Somebody like a narcissist can't love anyone. They don't love themselves. Martell, I don't care what anybody says. I've always thought Martell is sus, and a lot of narcissistic men are down low. And that's not Black men. That's not just Black men. Additional, and they pick women that essentially they admire and hate because they can't be them. Mel was that for Martell, in my estimation. And here it is 5 years after their full divorce. Not separation, full divorce. And this dumbass bitch he ain't married, ain't gonna marry, is in the car, like, I can only imagine how she keyed in and Martell's talking shit, this, that, and the other. He only brought that bitch because she's the one that, was part of what Mel knew. And that was, once again, to hurt her, which I think is also another opportunity for abuse, to try to re-traumatize her with that pain. And I'm angry about it for her. I was very hurt when I heard her say that, because I said, I always thought that was a grand possibility. And particularly in those deep southern states, I don't think this country doesn't take domestic violence seriously. And in the words of Bernie Mac's daughter, we don't hate domestic violence. I want to say her name is Janice McCullough. I can't remember, but she was like, this country doesn't hate domestic violence. It hates its victims. And I completely agree with that. And so she has to take that evidence in, then has to go back to court. See, this is what I mean. When he sits up there with his dumb ass, it's about the kids. No, it ain't. They ain't even in court over the kids. If it's about the kids, you mistreating their mother. You think those kids didn't see that? I don't care how young they were. You think they didn't absorb that? James Brown's daughter talks about how when she was 4, she remember her father dragging her mother out of the door, and she left him before, like she was in school. It ended up in the same abusive situation. It doesn't leave children like that. This infantile amnesia, like before the age of 2, and that's very damaging to young kids across the board. But boys will develop physical strength that may protect in certain ways as they get older, and girls will play a role. Now, the thing I will give male fights like a motherfucker. So I just wanted to tell you, girl, you keep fighting, but I wish you didn't have to. I wish you didn't have to. And every time he does this, it's another form of abuse, keeping her in court so she'll have to pay, and then requesting she pays my fees. I don't think she pays fees, but I'm just saying he had requested that before. And to see somebody continue to be so accomplished despite it, I have nothing but respect. I'll pray for. I honestly don't buy any of her products, but I actually feel like now I should, just because I want to support a Black woman who got to keep paying for all this bullshit. Because I'm just not that kind of person to buy stuff like that. But enough is a fucking enough. And this has got to stop. And that's why, even, I don't know if my letters will ever get anywhere with domestic violence, but I'm just saying, we have to take it serious. It would happen anywhere in this country, but particularly in those deep southern areas, deep southern states like Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, like when Georgia having the law, like, you have to go to counseling for a year before we grant a divorce. The fuck? Yeah, that was the thing. I'm not sure if it's currently like that in this moment. I can't imagine it wouldn't be. But in those like Bible Belt states where people just pervert the Bible and claim it's in the name of Jesus, they claim slavery was in the name of Jesus. All that other, it's dangerous. It's not funny, and people doing things. Well, what did you do? What did you say? Enough. And I'll be following the Zaya Harris case, but some of this stuff gets heavy for me, so I can't really talk about it immediately. Sometimes I have to process it before I talk about it because it hurts me. Like I feel it for them. And now, we're praying for you, we're rooting for you, and there are people still loving you and wishing you the absolute best. Hang in there, but you shouldn't have to hang. You should just be able to fly. You're still flying because God's got you, but many a woman have sat in church and prayed, gone to the altar in pain. And sometimes those prayers just quite frankly aren't answered the way we like them. So the issue isn't people say, oh, they're weak and they should leave and this, that, and the other. Let me tell you something. Ain't nothing stronger than a woman who has endured domestic violence and stayed with a man because she's afraid that if she leaves, because he's probably absorbed the money or controlled and that kind of thing, one, he'll make good on his promise that he'll kill her, take her kids away. Dwayne Wade is an example of that. Go and look it up. His first wife's family took him because he ain't had nobody. He hated women because of it, abused her, and then took her fucking kids from him, and then wanted to act like she was crazy when at that time she went to try to get him back, calling the police and all that bullshit. And I know Gabrielle Union ain't getting treated no better. I know she's not. That woman went to law school to figure out how to get her kids back. And speaking of Black women that can't be depended upon to understand people, and this is just going to be quick, Kelly Price, I wasn't even thinking about you. Okay. According to you, you're going to still sell out arenas and then arenas making money, this, that, and the other. Kelly Price, I'm going to tell you what turned me off from you completely was R&B Divas LA. And I don't know why watching something on TV like that should feel like something I could just, I just could not with her. Honestly, I didn't like Chrisette Michelle because of that show. Although she seems to be being perpetually punished for something completely different, while Black men who associate, whether it's Snoop Dogg or Nelly, can still get TV shows that people look at, so on and so forth. I'm guilty of that with the Nelly and Ashanti thing. Not because I was rooting for him, just trying to figure this shit out. And all I can say is calling us DEI hires, it's giving Trump. I understand that you're mad at people in your comments, but you've been known. Okay, granted, before social media, you've been known for a long time, Kelly Price. So don't tell me that's the first time you've ever dealt with press or bad media. You didn't know any better. And you getting kidnapped and showing up at it, like, because those are serious things. Like, I don't understand. And I don't know when you're saying, oh, y'all are losing y'all jobs, but I'm still going to be making money. Kelly Price, I'm just going to let you know right now, Black women are your audience. You do realize that, right? I'm not saying that Black men don't show up at your concerts with the women that brought them. But you do realize that, right? So literally offending the people that work and making these blanket statements is a terrible idea. And then telling us we ain't gonna have no money, well, that means you ain't gonna have no money neither. Now, unless you done at Lincoln Center singing opera or something I don't know about, which you ain't. But people are crazy. And that's what I mean. All my skin folk ain't my kin folk. People being of a certain gender, it's mindset. But mindset is also developed based on education, stretching your brain, based on being a critical thinker, a self-starter, an individual that understands, regardless of what everybody's saying, this is what I see, this is what I know is not wrong, and evolving. Frances Beale, when she wrote Double Jeopardy about Black women's racial, economic oppression, was right. Bell Hooks and Ain't I a Woman was right. Ida B. Wells' Crusade for Justice was right. Patricia Hill Collins and all her many Black feminist books is right. They're right. And it's there. All right. Those are just my thoughts. I got to go to bed. Or get ready to go to bed. All right.